Welcome everybody. Sorry to break up the dance party here, but let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for all of you who took the time to join this call tonight. I'm Diane. I'm one of the organizers here at the Center for Biological Diversity, and I'm based in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm on the call tonight with Ash Sloth and Brett Hartle. Ash, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, great to see you again. If you haven't seen me in a webinar before, my name is Ash. I am the engagement manager with the center's organizing program, Mobilize for the Wild, and I'm based in Oakland, California. Brett?
Hey everybody, I'm Brett Hartle. I'm the center's government affairs director. I'm here in DC right now, and I've been on a couple of these before, but great talking to you and seeing you all tonight.
Awesome, thanks to both of you for being on. I'm going to actually pass it back over to Ash now to go over some quick notes on tech before we get started.
Cool, thanks Diane. Okay, so just a few notes on tech. You'll see at the bottom of your screen a chat box. Please feel free to say hello, add some comments and chat with each other as we go along. Please only use the chat box for things related to this call, as it can be kind of distracting for others. And be sure to change the chat settings to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see you. There's also a button for questions and answers. Direct all of your questions here. Questions that go in the chat box will get lost pretty easily, so again, put your questions in the Q&A box. If you called in not using the Zoom app, you won't unfortunately see any of these features, but you can always reach out to us after the call with any questions. So with that, I'm going to go over our community guidelines. Please remember on the call tonight to follow these guidelines that you see on your screen here to ensure a respectful and inclusive space. And if you are new to organizing with us, you will also receive a copy of the full guidelines before you get started on working with us and volunteering with us. For those who are on the phone, I'll just read them over briefly. I will be friendly and respectful. I'll follow through on what I say I'll do. I will be inclusive, and I agree to nonviolence as a principle. So with that, I'm actually going to move to our nonpartisan disclaimer. And I want to just take a minute on that because it's important to note in an election year that we are a nonprofit and we cannot electioneer, meaning we cannot try to get one candidate elected over another, but we can advocate for issues. We are focused on elevating the extinction crisis and pressuring all candidates to take bold stances on this issue. And we encourage you to get politically involved for any candidate that you want, but specifically when identifying yourself with us or your role volunteering with us, it's important that you don't engage in electioneering. Okay, so now on to what we're doing tonight. So on the slide you see before you is our agenda for tonight. And feel free to scan that, but really what we're here to do tonight is take action. We know that change is made when we walk the talk. And so tonight you're going to learn more about what's happening in the campaign and why taking action right now is so important. Obviously, we live in a kind of bizarre time. But it's still really important to take action. So in addition to going over what we've done since the launch of Saving Life on Earth, we're going to talk about these latest updates and how you fit in, how you can exert people power and grassroots pressure in order to take action on wolves and take action to pass the Paw and Fin Act in Congress, which is basically our key to protecting and saving the Endangered Species Act right now. So with that, Diane, can you share with us a little bit about what we've been working on this year so far for folks who are new?
Yeah, of course. So for those of you who aren't familiar, we launched our Saving Life on Earth campaign in January of this year. And that was in response to this staggering wildlife extinction crisis that we're currently facing. We're losing about one species every hour, and as these species and animals, plants start to disappear, our ecosystems really start to unravel. And with that, they lose the ability to provide us with the things that we need, like clean air, clean water, and a stable environment. And of course, other species need these things as well. So despite how daunting this feels, it's actually not too late to address this. But we need to act really fast with bold, meaningful solutions that match the magnitude of this problem. So to do that, we need each and every one of you to help us show widespread, overwhelming support for addressing this crisis. So that's what we've been working on so far this year and will continue to work on. And Ash, you've actually been on the campaign trail with FrostPaw this year. Do you want to speak a little bit to that experience and also to what our fellow activists on the call have been doing so far to try to really make extinction part of the conversation in this election?
Yep, absolutely. Thanks so much. So we started out the year asking quite a bit of each of you. We asked you to go out there and get candidates on video talking about the extinction crisis. And so just baseline, I wanted to thank each and every one of you who attempted this. Speaking from experience, I can say this is not easy at all, whether you're in a bear suit or not. But even in attempting this, you are starting to change the narrative on the extinction crisis. And that's huge. Thank you. With your support, we were able to get Joe Biden, Andrew Yang, and Tom Steyer on video responding to questions about extinction. Many of you attempted to ask other candidates at campaign events or at field offices. And in addition to talking to candidates, many of you hosted debate watching parties to talk with members of your community about extinction. And 225 of you joined our digital pressure team to help amplify the message about the extinction crisis on social media. Again, that is amazing work. Really great job. Thank you so, so much.
Thanks, Ash. So yeah, in summary, clearly this is the year that we have and will continue to step out of our comfort zones, even if it's not always pushing through crowds and following presidential candidates. And with this goal, it may not always feel like measurable success, but with every conversation, we're really increasing awareness and starting to gradually change the narrative. So speaking of this, hundreds of you worked with us last year to gather comments in your community against the federal government's proposal to strip endangered species protections away from wolves across nearly all of the lower 48 states. Despite our record-breaking 1.8 million digital comments and 53,000 handwritten comments, and scientists urging the administration to keep wolves protected, we unfortunately expect that they will move forward with delisting this year. So we have Brett Hartle on the line tonight to give us the scoop from Washington, D.C. So Brett, do you have any insight on the timing that we can expect on this? And can you share more about what this actually means for wolves?
Sure. So we think timing-wise, the Trump administration is probably going to finalize their proposal and delist wolves in the next 6 months or so. Obviously, we don't know exactly when. They don't tell us. We're not really good friends with them, so it's a bit of a guess, but we think probably this summer is the most likely time. And obviously, you know, it depends a little bit on what state you're in, but it will be mostly bad news for wolves. In places like the Great Lakes, we're likely to see hunting and trapping resume fairly quickly. In other states, you know, it's going to impede or even sort of reverse some of the early recovery efforts. So, you know, we've only got one pack in California, small numbers in Oregon, and it's going to be harder for wolves to expand there. But we will still try to, you know, go on offense and help the, you know, the few wolves in Colorado and do what we can while we're dealing with all of the sort of legal side as well.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, so we wanted to share this news with you as soon as we had it, and also assure you that we do have a plan to fight back. So Brett, do you mind telling us a little bit more about our plan and what we've seen in the past with this sort of thing?
Yeah, so the good news is that we have a lot of experience fighting these things in court. We have challenged and succeeded over and over again when the Fish and Wildlife Service has tried to end protections for wolves. So we will obviously be right back in court immediately once this is announced, and we'll be fighting on that front. But obviously, you know, that's only part of it. I mean, I think we want to keep our eye on the ball. You know, we want to keep showing strong support for wolves as we think towards 2021 and what might happen if there's a new administration. These things can be reversed in lots of different ways. And we're, like I said, we're going to be also fighting on the ground in different states to try to protect wolves. So Colorado, California, Oregon, Washington, you know, we'll keep up all of those efforts as well. And the more that we can create that groundswell of support, the more likely that the delisting will be reversed. If we, you know, the court case will take a few years and maybe we can get it done sooner.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, so the Saving Life on Earth campaign is all about shifting the narrative. And of the species we work on, wolves have really been given one of the worst narratives of all. So it won't happen overnight, and this attack is certainly a setback, but we will change the narrative, we will shift the tide, and as Brett mentioned, it's really important to keep this up now and in the coming years to build this long-term sustainable support for wolves. So when the delisting comes out, we will invite everyone to an emergency webinar, and there we'll share more detail on what you can do. But right now, I'm going to actually launch a poll and see who's willing to fight back when this final rule is released. So please go ahead and answer the poll so we can do a quick temperature check of folks on the call. The number is going up so fast, I can't even keep up with it. So thank you so much, everyone. I'll give it one more minute because it's still moving pretty quickly. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. We will definitely keep you in the loop. In the meantime, we actually need your help right now to restore the very legislation that is currently protecting wolves. As many of you know, last year the Trump administration gutted the Endangered Species Act. And if we win this battle for wolves in court, we're still going to need an Endangered Species Act to come back to. So while we don't know when this announcement will come down exactly, we do know that we can't wait to take action. So this bedrock law that ultimately protects wolves is under attack right now, and that's why we're asking you to join us tonight in defending it. Brett, for folks who weren't with us last year, can you share a little bit more about last year's attack on the Endangered Species Act?
Sure. So last year, the Trump administration finalized a couple of regulations that rolled back and weakened how the Endangered Species Act is implemented for all species. So there are lots of different pieces of it. Some are more complicated than others, but in a nutshell, so threatened species will receive virtually no meaningful protections, even if they are listed. In effect, you can kill them and it's still legal. When we think about listing species, they will be looking at the economic cost of listing, which is a huge barrier to actually getting species protected. They've weakened the protections for critical habitats, so the most important places where species live. It'd be much easier to just destroy them for any type of resource extraction. And, you know, we're just going to see delays across the board in species getting protected because the way they've set up these rules, they're just making it harder and harder to really do good for endangered species.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's not good, but as Brett mentioned earlier, these things can be reversed, and there's been a piece of legislation introduced in the House of Representatives to combat this attack. It's called the Panthan Act, and many of you have actually worked with us in the past on this, and we really need to keep pushing to get this passed. So Brett, can you tell us about what the Panthan Act would do exactly?
Sure. So it's actually a really simple piece of legislation. It simply nullifies the Trump administration changes, and we would go back to the old system for how we did endangered species, which was basically workable and used for 30 years. So it's tried and true and very effective. And that bill, the Panthan Act, passed out of the committee last year at the end of the year. So the next step is to try to get it to the floor of the House, and I might be stealing someone's thunder, but we're actually already making really great progress. We've got a lot of co-sponsors. I think leadership is hearing our demands that this bill get time on the floor and passed out of the House, and that would be really, really huge if it were to happen. So that's going to be a really important thing to do in the next few months.
Awesome, thank you. I'm guessing the $1 million question that everyone has on the call right now is, why should we try to pass this in the House now, assuming it may get shut down in the Senate? Why is it strategic to really push this right now?
And I think that's for me, Diane, right?
Yeah, sorry.
But yeah, I mean, this, you know, gives you a sense on the timeline of what we're hoping for. My friendly amendment is probably getting it passed, I would say, hopefully before the August recess. Have to keep in mind, things are kind of unusual in our country right now, and it's hard to predict how the next few months are going to play out. But the most important reason to do this and to put pressure on Congress is the more co-sponsors we get, the more pressure they feel to actually vote on this. The better signal we also send, big picture, long-term, for the next administration, for the future Congresses, to the Fish and Wildlife Service itself, that what the Trump administration did was really terrible and needs to be rolled back. So even if it doesn't pass the Senate, and it won't, nothing passes the Senate, it's really critical. And frankly, you know, all members of the House are up for re-election, and we should make our demands known about what we care about as issues. Again, we're not endorsing one or the other. We think everyone should vote for endangered species. And frankly, this is when they're listening. And again, if we can get that done, that sends a huge signal that, you know, the one house of the Congress thinks that what Trump did to the Endangered Species Act was wrong. And that really helps us even on our litigation. So it is really critical.
Awesome, thank you, Rhett. So we know that now is the time. Ash, what can we do to make this happen from a grassroots level?
I'm so glad you asked. I get so pumped up about this. Okay, so there are lots of options out there depending on what's most strategic and depending on where your representative currently stands. And before we jump into that, I actually just want to address probably the other thing that may be on everyone's mind, and that's the coronavirus. So it's a kind of a brand new landscape we're operating in, and the center holds that public health is a priority, not only to stem the spread of the virus, but also to protect vulnerable communities. And we are encouraging folks to use prudence and caution in order to protect our health and safety. But that unfortunately changes the way that we organize. And specifically, that means that many of the tactics that we normally use, like hosting events and lobbying, have to be put on pause until we have a better understanding of COVID-19 and until the outbreak is under control. So as such, we are encouraging folks to apply grassroots pressure on their representatives via digital and virtual means for the time being. We will not be asking folks to host or attend in-person events until we can be sure that it's safe to do so. And like, no, that's no fantasy, this is not ideal, but we definitely thank you in advance for being patient and understanding, and most importantly, for continuing to exert people power in these new creative ways, which I'm now going to talk about. Okay, so let's talk about what we can still do to apply pressure. So currently, we have 116 sponsors on the bill. To put it into perspective, we gained 16 sponsors within the last couple weeks, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So as Brett said, like, this bill is getting traction and momentum. Our goal is to get to 218 co-sponsors. That's a majority of the House. That's the number we need to ensure this bill's passage. So to get there, we're asking all of you to call your representative. And some of you have met already with your representative on this issue last year. And it's critical that you continue to build your relationship with the office. If your representative has already signed on, that's awesome. Call them and ask them to become an outspoken champion on the issue. Again, it's great if they are already a co-sponsor, and definitely thank them for that. But you should also let them know that they can do so much more to ensure the passage of the act. Becoming an outspoken champion means that they generate media on the issue, they generate other co-sponsors, they get their colleagues to join them, and they work to get votes in the House to pass the bill. If your representative has not already signed on, call them and ask them to become a co-sponsor. The social pressure is mounting for them. And if you've already tried this and they still say no, don't worry, don't get discouraged. You'll still employ tactics to pressure them to do so, like writing letters to the editor to exert public pressure and then getting others to join you to do the same. Diane?
Thanks, Ash. So clearly there are several paths you can take depending on where your representative currently stands. Ash, how do folks figure out where to start?
Ooh, yeah, okay, so everyone I think is saw that nice flow chart. So here's kind of an overview of the tactics. So basically, we need to contact every rep to discover where they stand on this issue and establish that their constituents care a lot about this issue. Then, regardless of their position, we're going to pressure them to do more to support the bill and help ensure its passage. While we'll work with each one of you to pressure your specific representative, it in general is going to look something a little like this. Step 1, call your rep. Step 2, write a letter to the editor. Step 3, engage and educate others on the issue. Step 4, show your representative that constituents want them to do more. And then step 5, participate in the Endangered Species Day on May 15th. So don't worry if you feel a little daunted by this, we will work with you one-on-one to help you form your plan. We know that many of your representatives hold a wide array of stances on the bill, but rest assured there are plenty of ways to pressure each representative at every level. We have tactics for each one of them, and we will help you take action to use the most strategic ones.
Awesome, thanks. I would also add that with that one-on-one support, you will each be assigned mentors to help you at each step. The mentors, as well as us, are here to support you to help you accomplish each tactic and successfully pressure your representative across the spectrum of support for this piece of legislation. So in addition to that, we'll also be sending out a weekly email on what to do and how to do it. It's your job to keep your eyes peeled for those and to take action. So remember that wielding your constituent power is an important part of making change. Ash, how can folks get signed up to help get this legislation passed?
You can take action. Just like Diane said, it's your job to take action with us, and that's how we win, by walking the talk. We won't get to 218 co-sponsors by sitting on the sidelines. We have to show up and engage our representatives to support and pass this bill. Wildlife and endangered species depend on this. So I'm going to launch a poll right now that's going to pop up on your screen. And I'm asking each and every one of you to do just that. Will you join us? Will you help pressure your representatives to pass the Paw and Fin Act? Remember, if you sign up here, if you're interested, if you're game, If you're still just a little bit curious, press yes, because we're going to help support you one-on-one to really choose the best tactics to fit your representative and really lean into applying that pressure. And we'll be following up with you via email to really knock out each one of those next steps. It'll either be us or a mentor. So I'm just going to give maybe 30 more seconds here. Again, if you are even remotely curious, say yes, because we need folks to show up and take action to help protect endangered species. If you are on the phone, unfortunately, you won't be able to see this poll, but the solution is to keep your eyes peeled for the follow-up email tomorrow, because that's where you'll be able to click the link to take action and join us. All right, with that, I'm going to give this one last hurrah. Going once, going twice. All right, we'll close this poll. Thank you, everyone who took action. And now I'm going to pass it back to my esteemed co-host, Diane, to lead us through some question and answers.
All right, thanks, Ash. We'll start off with a quick one here. Someone's wondering the number for this legislation for the Panthan Act. It's 4348, correct, Brett? Okay, thank you. All right, let's see. Someone is wondering why pressure just representatives? Should we pressure senators too? Is there a similar piece of legislation in the Senate?
Yes, there is, and it's fine to pressure them too. I think it's slightly less important because the action is going to be in the House. But obviously, if you happen to live in a district where your member already is a champion and you want to put pressure somewhere else, that's fine. There is a parallel bill. I don't have the bill number, but there is a Senate companion bill. It definitely needs more co-sponsors. That sends a great signal as well. We're focusing on the House because, again, we could get a vote because obviously Mitch McConnell in the Senate doesn't let much through. That's good. So that's the strategy, but absolutely. And if you want to, go above and beyond, for sure, reach out to them and try to get them to co-sponsor as well.
Awesome, thanks. Someone is wondering, what are the bold solutions needed for the extinction crisis? Brett, can you speak a little bit to the presidential plan?
Sure. So we came up with a report a few months back called Saving Life on Earth. It's on our website. You can find it. We call for a huge increase in funding and resources, both here and abroad, as well as having the president take a strong executive action. The next president has a great deal of authority to use executive power to stem a lot of the major threats to wildlife. They've never been invoked, but they exist and they can be used. So, I could go through them all, but they're all online on our website. Nice, easy flowchart right at the beginning that lays them all out. And we're also, going to be pushing those ideas in Congress as well. And I see the work we're doing now really as the foundation for some of these bigger, bolder ideas. You have to kind of build those champions first before you give them a really huge ask. So there's a long-term strategy here as well.
Great, thank you. So it looks like a few folks have questions about the letter to the editor and what we mean by that, which editors to write letters to, and kind of why this tactic matters overall. Ash, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, apologies for using some insider language. I'm referenced letters to the editors of newspapers. And while I will acknowledge that print journalism is unfortunately a declining medium, it's still an incredibly important one because for two reasons. One is because it's actually still a place where people do read and inform their own opinions about issues. And two, perhaps equally as importantly, it's where the representatives read. And if folks write letters to the editor and name their representative in the letter when addressing the issue, their staffers and those representatives will definitely see that letter to the editor. It's actually very important for them to see that their constituents, in addition to contacting them via phone and email, are willing to actually be vocally public in a public forum like a newspaper about the issue that is deeply meaningful to them, especially when they get called out. So letters to the editor are great because they often signify that not that just one person is writing that letter, but they actually kind of represent a much broader number of people who feel similarly on the issue. Letters to the editor are even more powerful when you get others to join you. And so if you are interested in writing a letter to the editor, again, we will help you walk through this process. We have mentors and guides to help you write letters to the editors of newspaper. And if you're old hat, if you're a veteran on that, we definitely have other tactics that you could use to generate different types of media as well.
Great, thank you. So we have several folks asking about representatives who are particularly hostile toward wildlife. Wondering if it's even worth giving them the phone call, if they should focus on a different representative. Any insight on that?
It's definitely worth a phone call, and I'll allow Brett to chime in too. And here's why. Although it may feel a little defeatist, it's actually still important for just basic democracy for those representatives to hear that their constituents care about this issue. And it's really important for you to do the basic building block that we need to move this campaign and win, which is grassroots organizing. When you take action at this level and get others, even just a handful of others, even just your friends or your family or your neighbors to join you, you're actually moving the conversation and shifting the debate in your own hometown, in your district, and that's deeply meaningful to moving the overall debate and winning on this issue. I will, if Brett has anything to chime in here, I will also say that, again, as Diane and I laid out, the call is just the first step. The call is just a signal to establish a relationship with the office. And there are many, many other tactics that we can help walk you through to really crank up the pressure and either move someone or, in the very least, neutralize them.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think Ash was totally right. I mean, if you happen to live in a district where your representative is very hostile, I do, it can be frustrating, but they should still hear from us. I mean, they should feel like when they take these really anti-wildlife votes that there might be consequence. And you know, you can always also, again, call your senator as well if you maybe have a slightly better chance of having a good conversation. But I think, you know, yeah, they might not all go well, but it's still important for members of Congress to hear what we think, because otherwise they assume what they're doing is great, and it isn't.
Definitely. So Brett, when you mentioned the attacks to the Endangered Species Act last year, you referenced threatened species. Can you clarify what the difference is between a threatened or endangered species?
Sure. So under the Endangered Species Act, species can be listed as either endangered or threatened. And when they're endangered, which is obviously closer to extinction, there's a large suite of protections that come into play. Most importantly, it's illegal to what's called to take them, which means to kill them or injure them or harm them. For threatened species, it's a little bit more optional. And for a very long time, we used a precautionary approach. So basically since the 70s, the rule was give threatened species the same benefit of the doubt, protect them from take, unless there was a specific type of harm that we wanted to exempt for a particular policy reason. So it was precautionary. Trump basically flipped that on its head so that if you're threatened and you get listed, no prohibitions will apply unless they decide to add them. And, you know, the odds of that happening are quite low. So You went from a precautionary conservation approach to an approach that's much more industry friendly, that doesn't have any real teeth. And that's unfortunate because a lot of these threatened species, what will happen is they'll just keep declining, and then eventually they'll need to be endangered. So we'll have lost a lot of time as they slip closer to extinction.
Let's see here. Oh, okay. So we mentioned fighting back for wolves, and one of the places was Colorado that was mentioned. And there's a question here: has Colorado introduced legislation to reintroduce wolves?
Not yet. So there's a ballot initiative that has qualified for the November ballots in the state, and ballot initiatives actually are not electioneering, so we can talk about them freely because they don't actually fall under that category. We helped get that ballot initiative on the November ballot along with other environmental groups. It would require the Fish and Game Commission to develop a reintroduction program, so it would effectively change state law. So it's on the ballot. We support it. You know, in recent news, there are several wolves now in far northwest Colorado. There may be a pack, it's a little unclear, but there's several wolves there. That could be the seeds of a population. So obviously, again, that's why they need protection under the federal law, but we're trying to get Colorado to do more because wolves are finally making it through Wyoming, through that gauntlet of really bad, you know, they're shooting them left and right. So we're finally seeing that, and we want to make sure that that population can grow. So that's the strategy right now in Colorado.
Okay, thank you. I see a couple more wolf questions, so I'll just continue on this and then we'll shift over to the others. Just one more here. Which populations of wolves would this delisting impact?
It would impact all wolves except Mexican wolves. Mexican wolves in Arizona, New Mexico will still be protected. There are different subspecies. They're listed separately as endangered. But for all other wolves in the lower 48 states that are currently protected, those protections will go away. So it would be pretty much everywhere else. The Northern Rockies are already delisted, but it would be the Great Lakes, the Northwest, California, and Colorado and Utah. And even though there's 0 wolves, we've always argued that there should be wolves in the Northeast. It would, you know, say that they don't belong there. Red wolves are a separate species. They're listed separately. They're taxonomically different, genetically different. Those wolves are also still protected. Unfortunately, there's only a handful of them that are still in the wild. There's a captive population. They're not doing great either, but that population is unchanged.
Okay, thank you. So back to taking action right now on the Panthan Act. A few folks are wondering where they can find a list of co-sponsors. Ash, you want to help guide folks there?
Yeah, absolutely. I posted the link to congress.gov, or I have been in the chat box a couple times, and I'll keep doing it throughout the remainder of the call. But the most up-to-date place to find is actually on the congressional website and the site for the bill itself.
Great, thanks. We will also follow up with an email tomorrow that will tell you whether or not they are signed on by helping you give them a call. So you can keep an eye out for that as well. All right, let's see here. I think this one will be for Brett. You mentioned that we're trying to pass the Panthan Act to be ready for next year. What if the same administration is in office again that made the changes to the Endangered Species Act in the first place?
Well, we have a court case as well, so there's good news there, and I think we have a pretty good chance of prevailing. Court cases are just slower; they take more time. Right now, we're you know, you never know how fast the judge is going to go. So we're not out of options. That will continue, and we hope to succeed there. You know, yeah, I mean, obviously that can happen. We will, you know, with all of this, it's about building the foundation. I mean, sometimes it takes time to undo the bad things. And again, if you have 200 members of Congress in the House on your side, that's awesome. And then, you know, maybe the Senate flips. That also creates pressure. It's still important to remember that even just the Fish and Wildlife Service, they also notice when a bill like that gets passed. Again, it may not change immediately, but that's a pretty strong signal to send to the agency that Congress is unhappy, and Congress writes the budget for those agencies. So all of it matters. Obviously, we want to see these things undone as quickly as possible, but sometimes it takes longer, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Thank you. All right, let's see here. Someone said they missed the name of the legislation. So if anyone didn't get it, is the Panthan Act. It's HR 4348, and Ash is sharing the link in the chat now. Let's see here. Oh, okay. So with that link, you'll see who has signed on, but Ash, are you able to share a link for folks to find out who their representative is so they can then look at that?
Sure.
We'll get that.
I can do that right now.
Great, thank you. Alrighty, let's see here. We mentioned some emergency webinar for wolves when the delisting comes down, and some potential actions then. Ash, I know you may be in the middle of looking for that link, but can you speak a little bit to like what can actually be done at the grassroots level and what that may look like broadly?
Yeah, absolutely. So we will be organizing folks to essentially, well, let me back up and say, like, this will be a moment of rage, at least for me personally. Like, I'll feel like pretty outraged at this moment, even though I know it's coming. And so this is a really good moment for all of you to actually do just that as well. And tell the federal government, the folks at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, how angry you are. And part of the importance of this is really twofold. Is one, to actually like build community with each other and continue to organize. But two, as Brett alluded to earlier, is actually to signal for all of Congress, but both you know, who are watching, as well as folks in the administration, to see that everyday folks are pretty pissed about this issue and are willing to show up and rally and take action and protest on this issue. Right now, kind of loosely speaking, the plan is actually to have very colorful participatory rallies at Fish and Wildlife offices, and probably some other types of offices as well if you don't live near a U.S. Fish and Wildlife office. And that's kind of the loose thinking right now. And we'd like to really generate some media on this in order to get this in the public eye and get people talking about this. Again, we don't know when that time will be, but I'm so thankful that each one of you are going to, for all of you who raise your hand, that you're ready to step up and take that type of action when the announcement happens. Thank you.
Definitely. A few other folks are wondering if we can provide talking points for their letters to the editor, and also have questions about where they can go for support in writing that.
So great news. There are a couple, like two main avenues. One is that if you signed up tonight, or if you didn't and you want to, you can sign up via email tomorrow, and you'll get one-on-one support from staff and mentors to do all of these tactics, including letters to the editor. We will supply you with points as well as guidelines as to how to write the best letter to the editor, and kind of like give you a structured format in order to fit in your own words. You'll speak from the heart, why this issue matters to you, and what's at stake for endangered species and all wildlife. So those talking points you'll get through your one-on-one support, but you can also find on our website, which will give you all those links, talking points, website links in the follow-up email tomorrow morning or sometime tomorrow.
Awesome. Let's see, I'll do one final question because a bunch of folks are asking it before we wrap up here. We talked about this a little bit, but several people are asking if they should try to actually set up a meeting, and why not set up a meeting right now. Ash, do you want to?
Oh, I can.
A little more on that.
I'll take that.
Okay.
Just because I was on the Hill today in DC, and most offices are not going to be having in-person meetings, probably starting Monday. And I think we're going to see more of that. Already about half of my meetings this week have been turned into telephone calls. So I think realistically, larger events are superseding some of these things, and we have to just be mindful and respectful of that. And you know, you can ask, and if you feel safe, I mean, I think that's the most important thing, like Ash said, is to be safe. Maybe they will, but I don't think it's worth it, honestly, right now. And I think, you know, normally we say, yeah, it's good to have it in person because it shows you're really committed. But I think in this situation, we're really on uncharted waters, and it's just better to stick to the phone and other things like that.
Yeah, and really none of this is wasted. So even if in person is our preferred method most of the time, they're going to hear us, whether it's a phone call, a letter to the editor, or any of these steps along the way. The most important thing is that they hear from us, no matter what. All right, so if your questions didn't get answered, feel free to reach out to us, but I'm gonna go ahead and wrap us up here.
Hey Diane, can I just mention one last thing, just because I know one of our activists had a specific question that they pinged me about, which was, you know, the extinction crisis is like pretty existential, and it's oftentimes really hard to wrap our brains around a species going extinct every hour. And so, you know, the question was like, how can we connect with others? How can we message on this issue in a way that's relatable and really conveys kind of story and meaning, particularly to our representatives, who are important people to hear us right now. And I would just say the most important thing when you're getting in contact with your representative or connecting with other folks to get them to join you is actually to talk in terms of your own personal story and what's at stake for you, and to make this issue relevant. All of you are actually experts on your own story, and it's that storytelling that actually builds connection between people in a way that brings people in. And when you're able to make that connection, people feel inspired to join you. I think the talking points that you'll see in tomorrow's follow-up email will give you an amazing base of ways to talk about this issue with some really compelling numbers. But other ways that you could really personalize that is look up some local endangered species, because unfortunately everyone lives near one. And again, really convey the plight of what this means. Like those numbers are super, super helpful. But again, connecting with that story helps build a trust and inspiration and some sort of meaning with others, including your representatives, that will help them get on board and really help spread our message far and wide.
Thank you, Ash. Yeah, that is really important. Thanks for sharing that. All right, thank you to everyone who helped by signing up tonight to help us pass the Panthan Act, and everyone who's going to jump in and help with the wolf delisting. It's really inspiring and I know it gives us a lot of hope just to see how many people are willing to jump up and fight. So thank you for being on. We know that everyone on this call may be feeling this existentialism and feeling discouraged about wolves and the war on wildlife, and we certainly are too. We're confident in our plan to fight back, but it's still heartbreaking, of course. So we have to remember at times like this that this movement is about a historic political and social shift toward protecting life on Earth. So we're going to take hits like this along the way, but ultimately we will succeed and we will win. So with that, you can expect a call within the next 2 days from one of our organizers or a mentor to help you with next steps. The step-by-step guide, the recording of this call, and any other materials you may need can be found at savelifeonearth.org. We'll be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow with the link that you need to call your representative. So keep an eye out for that. And just know that sometimes if our messages are going to spam, you can add mobilize@biologicaldiversity.org to your contact list so that they'll come into your inbox from now on. All right, thank you everyone for joining the call, and we will be in touch soon.